everyone to welcome the debate around the modularisation and integration of legislative systems. So my name is Jonathan from NovaWorks. We're a company that advises parliaments around the world, really about their digital processes and technology options as well. So we've been working with parliaments for the last 20 plus years. And really it's about, exploring, what today's debate is going to be around is about exploring what the importance is of the integration of legislative systems and why it's actually really important to modularize, and what are some of the challenges for the integration of legislative systems as well. It's all right. One of the biggest challenges that we've seen over the last 5 to 10 years is that, as we all know, that legislative systems can be quite big and complex and sometimes disconnected from each other. And it usually means that the ability for parliaments and legislative authorities to introduce new systems or processes can be quite difficult without having to worry about the impacts on legacy and interconnected systems that they may already have. So I thought we might start this conversation. Pablo, from your experience, within your own legislative authority, like why do you believe integration of legislative systems is actually important to where you work?
Okay, good morning, everyone. Buenos días, bom dia para todo mundo. I am Pablo from Córdoba, Legislature of Córdoba. I'm the Director of Technology. So my insights would be more technical than aligned to the strategy of this current leadership. So the first challenge that we need to, we had faced in our legislature is to see as an integrated system, not only but the processes or the system isolated that we had in the legislature, but also with an insight of the technology that we needed to create this integration, but also the infrastructure needed to make it happen. So with an holistic view of what we need and the process that we need to be approached, and also making focused on the value that we are creating for the users, because sometimes when you are creating or you are making the reality in a system, you are automating a process, you can lose the focus of what the user needs, and in this case, specific users with requirements that are very complex, and sometimes with several systems that we have in place. The main challenge is to understand quite well what we need to do before start creating this integration. But the benefits that we had here in the legislature, we actually went from when we started this leadership in 2019, we faced a legislature process with a lot of papers, little things digitalized. And we had a very good approach of going from 0 or 2 to 100% digitalized system and the process and the whole process. And the main benefits that we had in this integration, not only the system integration, but also the file system, databases, also the infrastructure. The automation was a key point for us because we needed to speed the process of the life cycle of a legislation file, and this automation was a key. But also when we started to speed this process, we had metrics to understand that this speed has impacted in the productivity of the amount of presentations, files, processes, and also we increased the availability. And as we integrated the security of regarding access management, we also increase security. So the integration has a lot of benefits, not only for us as an IT team, but also for the customer, for our users. Actually, there are all the teams in charge of making all the files of law happening.
So it's very interesting. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting point, is that the integration can actually increase or enhance your security as well. So yeah, so I was wondering, Rodolfo, do you have any sort of comments around Pablo's sort of viewpoints as well? And also, do you have any sort of additional points as well around importance around what, why we should sort of modularize systems and components as well within the Parliament?
Yes, thank you. And first, can you hear me well?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, thank you. Well, I agree with Pablo, and the challenge of digital transformation can be coped with using modularization. But thinking about it in a broader perspective, there's a need to rethink the business processes from the perspective of a digital world. And this means that we have to think how the world works today. Often parliaments are considered late adopters. And right now, senior managers are asking not only the IT department, but the whole organization to do more with higher quality, lower cost, and in less time. And because of that, legacy systems that were built with a different mindset cannot just be thrown into the trash bin. We have to use them in order to provide new functionalities, mainly the ones that became a reality after the internet era, after the digital world. And modularization is the way to embrace new functionalities without losing the old ones. Losing the old ones would be the worst case scenario, because you have a culture around the legacy systems. People, workers of the parliaments are already able to use them with practice, so they are quicker using those systems. And you have to think about all the new stuff that were not present 30 or 40 years ago, like cybersecurity, which is a highly important feature nowadays, because we have seen an increasing number of cyber attack year after year. We have also to think that people, citizens, are willing to engage with the legislative process. And this started a while ago, but mainly after the early 2010s with the movements like Arab Spring. And the parliaments need to address this using new functionalities, integrating all those new functionalities that will allow, on the one side, parliamentarians and MEPs to work remotely, and citizens to participate, to engage in the legislative process, giving new thoughts, new ideas, and bringing more information that will be debated in the parliament. So I believe that those are the main things that I could think of. So back to you, Jonathan. Thank you.
Fantastic. So, it's an interesting sort of section when we look at, some of the big challenges when we look at the integration of legislative systems. And, one of the biggest sort of things that we find is that, change management of the end users. So when we actually are looking at, the modularization of systems and how that can actually then look at what your actual legacy systems are. And so for example, Pablo, have you, within your sort of your digitalization processes and whatnot, have you had to deal with a lot of legacy systems, and what were some of the challenges which you faced around either upgrading or replacing those sort of legacy systems?
Okay, in our legislature, we had a chance. Sometimes you can feel that you are lagging in that place because we had to scratch from zero a lot of things. So there wasn't much in place, so we had to create a lot of things from zero. So, but it faced a process because sometimes you need to understand well what we did, what everyone did on paper or manually. So that's a phase that we approach with the process of creating prototypes with the end user, because we understand the need, and when we went to the practice, we had to change a lot of things because of new requirements or understanding better the requirements. So it was very important to have a system in place to coordinate all the incident management, having to prioritize those incidents, creating owners for those incidents, and then go with the process of change management in place in order to create a better life cycle of the development and also of the releases. Also, that we have in our development scenario or the development infrastructure is a test environment and a production environment that was very important. So we had local tests in order to make sure that every release are actually executed with all the security and making sure that the end user has the approval of that release. So it was actually coordinated by a project manager with developers and having some processes in place that I believe it's very important in the time that we are changing or creating or digitalizing something as complex as legislative processes. So yes, change management was a key during the development and also right now, because when we talking about modularization, there's a lot of benefits regarding development because it's not the same to making focus in some module or some functionality regarding some requirement from specific users, but also it helps us to isolate some modules or some functionalities and work very focused in one problem or one issue, and then have a rapid response, and this is in our case worked together with the IT team because we actually decided to move all these system in a virtualized model. So the releases after the change management process is approved, the releases of these updates are fast, accurate, and making sure that we can roll back to the previous or a previous version. So yes, it is actually not finished because the system that we have in place right now, it's getting robust, getting understanding, and getting better with insights of all the parts and the users. But I believe when we are talking about migrations from previous one or legacy system, it's very important that you have all in place from the legacy system and other requirements, because what we need to understand is we need to give value to the users, that we actually making their work better, faster, and secure.
I think that's a very good point. I think by having a more modular approach, I think it does allow you to adapt and to react as well in a quick fashion to particular concerns Rodolfo, do you have any particular, do you want to add anything to that as well, or any additional commentary?
Yes. What we have to think about is that we often have now complex systems, and the best way to deal with complex systems is to split those complex systems into a smaller units that you can understand, that you can like get the requirements in a short period of time, develop and test, and finally deploy, let's say in 3 weeks, 4 weeks. So we had to change our development process and start thinking about an agile process in order to be able to accomplish this. And as Pablo said, we have to think about building new functionalities and keeping the old system, the legacy system, because that's the best way to deliver value to the organization, to our users, to the citizens, to the MPs, and so on. So what I believe that modularization helps a lot is this way. You have, you can understand the unity way better than you can understand the whole system at once. So you gradually develops the complex system without the need to tackle with the complexities of the requirements at once. I guess that's the best thing that we can get from the modularization.
Yeah, I agree, and I think one of the issues that we see quite regularly is that when parliaments look at their existing systems, they always feel like, where do we start, or how do we how do we actually get new functionality because we have such a massive legacy system in place, and they feel like it's going to be a, say, a very expensive journey or a very complicated journey to start. And I think one of the ways which we've been sort of discussing with various legislatives is to tackle it in a modular approach. And as you sort of said, the agile framework, or taking it a different sort of way to say, if you just tackle one section at a time or one problem at a time, but still having a master plan in place, then modularization, and you can still integrate with your legacy systems, is actually a very powerful and also cost-effective way to actually implement new features to stay current. Because I think a lot of the sort of issues which we've been seeing in the past has been that sometimes parliaments are behind in terms of technology because of these sort of issues and these complex issues, because of legacy systems, and the ability for them to actually change is quite complex as well. So I can definitely appreciate a lot of those sort of comments around how that can actually affect value for money, and understanding that they can change, but in a different way.
Okay. Yeah. Go ahead,
Pablo. Yeah, please feel free to add to that.
Yeah, sure. The main challenge that we have that we had actually during the development of this integrated system is getting the right person with the skills needed in order to get involved in the development process. The developers. I don't know if it's something from Argentina or also, but also in Latin America, specialized developers are very difficult to obtain or to take time to, and we needed specific skills for this project, and we had that. And when we are talking about modularization, we try to be careful because of the experience, not only to get an isolated approach of making focused on a module, for instance, but also always looking for the big picture, because sometimes when you divide a problem, you intend to create different problems with the same size, and sometimes the size of each problem intend to increase. And in our case, we needed to have a look to the big picture of what we need, the strategy of the system, the strategy of the legislature, in order to not making focus just in one single problem and one single issue as a big one, and in that case reduce the complexity. So the idea for our integrative system is to make sure that we have a simple system with a simple process that covers every step of the legislative process, and making sure that when we divide a problem, we don't have a lot of big problems to solve. So we need to be careful that we modularized because of the cost effective during the development process, because it's better in order to time response, or it's secured because of we need to make focus in just one module, but we need to make sure that we don't use the main picture, the big picture, that the strategy, what we are going, and not making focus just in one thing, but in the whole thing.
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. And it's an interesting point you made around the specialized sort of skill set as well. And, I think everywhere in the world, it's hard to find, skilled, sort of people to help with that sort of process. And, I think this is probably why, it is important that we have these sort of forums and these debates, so that, people actually know that there are other sort of places who have been through this process, and there's a lot of learnings as well, which which people can actually look at applying around what modularization actually does look like. And there are other sort of legislative authorities like yourselves who have actually been through a process and still going through that process, and but learnings around that, which is really, really important. So yeah, Rodolfo, do you have any sort of additional comments around what Pablo was saying?
Yes, I believe so, Jonathan. Thank you. One of the problems that we have is that nowadays, both of you mentioned it already, is the lack of IT professionals. Right now in Brazil, we are suffering a lot from that. In the past, I could read a lot that the developed countries were having this kind of issue, the shortage in IT professional. And since the pandemic, the remote work became a reality. And right now, developed countries are hiring remote workers in all over the world. So I believe that the whole world is facing this kind of problem. It's an issue that we have to take into account. Another thing about modularization that Pablo mentioned is that I would like to point out is that when you divide the complex problem into smaller ones that you can easily understand, those modules you can, if you have enough human resources, you can start developing 2, 3, or 4 of them at the same time. So you can do it quicker and do it better if you have enough human resources. And I believe that that's one of the ways to go. You focus on new functionalities, integrating with your legacy system, and trying to develop as much as you can. And one of the things that I believe it is important is that parliaments, most of the time, they do exactly the same job. They perform exactly the same processes. So if you start cooperating or collaborating one parliament with other parliaments, some of those modules may be not exactly the same, but they may be applied to different parliaments with minor changes. So we could even get more human resources just by collaborating and cooperating with each other.
Yeah, that's a very, very good point. We tend to sometimes help broker those connections, even here in sort of Australia as well. And what we've found, through that specific approach is that the ability to save money just by talking to another legislature as well is quite significant, because they might have one module which you don't have and vice versa, and you can actually share that knowledge between the two without it being a sort of a competitive approach as well. And I think there's been a lot of movement around open source and open data and a whole range of other things as well, where I think a collaborative approach around the modularisation and even integration in terms of how did you integrate with your public website, or how did you actually do this or this or this, is actually a very valuable tool to actually talk to different authorities around the world.
Yes, I agree with you, Jonathan. And nowadays it's even easier and cheaper. I can say that prior to the pandemic, most of the times we would talk to other colleagues from other parliaments in presidential meetings. So I would have to fly to Europe, to the US, or they would have to come to Brazil. So it was a costly endeavor. Right now, since the pandemic, we are almost every week, I have a meeting with friends from all over the world. So now it's easier and cheaper to do that. So there is almost no excuse to not do that, right?
Yeah, and Pablo, do you have any experience with dealing with other jurisdictions, and have they been of any sort of assistance around what we've been talking about today?
Well, not as a challenge that we need to work with another teams. We have a specialized team in legislature or laws that we need to, or regulations here in our legislature. So we always consult these kind of issues that we have. We have a very good experience integrated digital signed into our system, into our integrated system. So we need to work together with other organizations and regulations. And also a good experience because our Córdoba, our province, has a very good citizens applications that is actually implemented in the past several years ago. And we decided to have our access management linked to this application that is actually managed from another government organization, from another team. So we work together with them with making sure that we are in compliance with some of the point of the data privacy, making sure that all the information that we had to share or we had to include in this system is actually in compliance with these regulations.
Excellent, thank you. I think we're conscious that sort of behind schedule a little bit already. So what I might do is we'll give everyone like 2 minutes to have some closing remarks, and we'll try to sort of wrap it up a little bit early so we can make up a little bit of time. So yeah, Rodolfo, do you want to go first with the 2 minutes of your final closing remarks?
Okay, just say that in order to make a good plan for the digital transformation, modularization is a very good way to go. Think agile. Some people in the team will have to keep the broader view of the complex system, but probably the teams that are dealing with each module, they will be focused on that module. Also, when you have a self-contained chunk of code, let's say a web service, an object, a module, or whatever name we may call it, It's easier for you to test it, to monitor, to refactor, to fix errors and things like that. So it's the way to go. So I believe it's the best way to go nowadays in order to take your parliament into the digital world. Thank you.
Pablo, would you like to add in the closing remarks for the last couple of minutes?
Sure, I agree with Rodolfo that modularization it's had a lot of benefits in terms of cost, in terms of speed and process and availability. We encourage to keep working, making focus to divide the whole problems in single and simple ones, but also making focused on the integration and the holistic view of all the need and the complete process that we are on the strategy that we need to follow. And this is a teamwork, you know, not only from the developers, but also from the IT guys, also from the security team, the strategy, the project management team, and also from the users. It's teamwork that we need to keep working together and very closely. And one aspect that is very important nowadays that we have a lot of meetings, that we have a lot of opportunities to work and work together besides the distance, is to document your process, document what you're doing. Because today we have a challenge that we have a person that maybe tomorrow is in another place and working in another environment, and we need to establish a documentation of all the process that we are creating a system, but also the documentation of the requirements, the changes, and making sure that sometimes whenever we can review that documents, understand the needs, and make sure that we can improve that system implemented, making sure that we have access to make those improvements and not just scratch from zero, but also improving.
Fantastic. So yeah, with that, I'd like to thank both yourself, Pablo, and Rodolfo as well for your very valuable insights in